investigating Apple. Prosecutors in France want to know why the company slows down its older iPhones. It's claimed it could be a ploy to get users to upgrade. Lawsuits are also underway in the US. So, how will all of this impact on consumers' trust in Apple products? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. For many customers, Apple and its iPhones are the best in the business, the ultimate in excellence. That was until last month, when the company admitted to slowing down older models. It said that it was done to protect battery life, but users hadn't been told. Some suspect that there was another motive, and a US senator has demanded answers from Apple CEO Tim Cook. A French prosecutor has also now launched an investigation. We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first, Natasha Butler reports from Paris.
In France, 1 in 5 smartphone users owns an iPhone. Each new model causes much excitement, but not everyone is happy with the US manufacturer. A French consumer watchdog has filed a legal complaint saying Apple deliberately slows down older iPhone models to encourage customers to buy newer ones.
We think that they are doing what we call planned obsolescence in the purpose for people to buy new one. It's a marketing strategy, and we think that we have enough proof to make this lawsuit now.
Hopp says Apple uses software updates to slow down its phones. The watchdog says recent updates coincided with the release of the iPhone 8. In France, such a practice is illegal. Under French law, it is a crime to deliberately shorten the lifespan of a product in order to try and force consumers to buy new ones. Those found guilty can be punished with a prison sentence, a large fine, and companies can be forced to pay up to 5% of their annual earnings. In Paris, some Apple customers welcomed the investigation.
It's important to know what's going on because we are all hostages of multinationals.
I bought a new phone that I have to charge all the time, and the updates make it slower. I think it's done on purpose, even though it's illegal here.
After a flurry of similar lawsuits in the US last year, Apple admitted to intentionally slowing down its old phones, saying it was done to help prolong battery life. Some analysts say the company should have been more transparent.
Everyone knows that their phone starts to lose power after a certain time, and this is actually quite a clever way of dealing with it. What's interesting is how it's being presented in rather a negative light, and I think that's Apple's fault for not communicating better that they were doing this to help their users.
Al Jazeera contacted Apple in France for comment, but has not received a reply. Faced with a criminal investigation, though, the stakes here for the tech giant are high. Natasha Butler, Al Jazeera, Paris.
Well, as Natasha was saying, Apple says it slows down phones over time to extend battery life. This is the company's statement from December 28th. All rechargeable batteries become less effective as they chemically age. Apple went on to say that iOS updates aim to manage older phones to prevent unexpected battery shutdowns. But that can also mean longer launch times for apps and other reductions in performance. As a result, Apple says it will soon issue an update that gives users more visibility into the health of their iPhone's battery so they can see for themselves if its condition is affecting performance. Let's bring in our guests then for today's discussion. From London, we're joined by Glyn Mood, who you saw in Natasha's report, a technology writer and blogger. He's the author of Rebel Code, Linux and the Open Source Revolution. From Xi'an in China, via Skype, Wang Boyuan, a writer for Technode, an English-language publication that covers China's tech industry. And from New York, we're joined by Dean Crutchfield, a branding expert. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Glyn, let's start with you then. Does Apple's explanation as to why they've throttled back performance on some iPhone models make technical sense? Does it stand up to scrutiny?
I think it does, and there's an important point to make here which hasn't been drawn out perhaps enough. People are talking about phones being slowed down, and Apple has said that it does do that, but only in certain circumstances. For example, when it's drawing excessive power from the battery. So this is not about slowing down phones all the time. It's about certain moments, as you rightly mentioned. When you launch an app, when you scroll through things, then you may see some slowing down. So it's not true that they are slowing down their phones in general. They are stopping the peak power causing problems.
So basically, Apple's introduced a performance slowdown to mask, at some times, some points when you're using the phone, you'll notice this slowdown to mask a deficiency in battery power. The computing power of the phone hasn't changed. It hasn't got any slower. I mean, what are the ethics of this?
Well, I mean, personally, I think, as I said in the excerpt that you showed before, that Apple has communicated this extraordinarily badly. They could have said, and should have said, we are trying to help people use their phones for longer. We're actually extending their life. Instead, they made this change without telling people, and that was the big mistake, I think.
Wang Boyuan in Xi'an. Apple has apologized for its poor handling of the issue. It's cut the price of a battery replacement. But if this throttling is software controlled, is a new battery going to restore performance to my iPhone?
Yes, just as you said, once the new battery is replaced onto the old devices, the performance will return to its normal standard. Yes.
Okay, this isn't then, as far as you're concerned, a case of programmed obsolescence, as some people have suggested. Indeed, France taking a serious look at that issue. Apple isn't deliberately slowing older phones in order to get us all to buy a new iPhone.
I think this is a battery problem. It's not a processor problem. So the problem is about the battery. Once the battery is on its chemical ends, so Apple, in order to extend its lifespan, so Apple have to slow down the performance a little bit to save the battery life. It's just like when you use a laptop, they have if you are running Windows on a laptop, you have for the battery you have 3 options like energy saving, average, and full throttle. You can choose that. I think this is the same function as in iPhone as in a notebook. Yes.
Dean Crutchfield in New York. Is Apple going to lose sales due to this negative publicity? What's the fallout going to be for the company? The loss of faith, coupled, I suppose, with the realization that a customer can replace a battery for, what, $30 and restore performance rather than spend $1,000 on a new one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is not a technology issue. This is not a product problem. This is about Apple's brand and their consumers' love for that brand, their consumers' trust in that brand. So the big question here is this a close shave or a deep cut? And I believe Apple is bleeding, and their response so far adds to the momentum of the chatter that's going out there. I think Bezos often says a brand is what people say about you when they leave the room, and there's a lot of people talking about Apple right now. So this is a much bigger problem than I think they anticipate it could be. I think, therefore, they have to behave in a way that recognizes that crisis can be like a bomb for a brand like Apple, and it can actually, create a lot of problems in terms of people's perception of that brand. So it's not what you say, it's what you do. And here's the interesting thing. If that product strategy was meant to benefit the consumer, how come it wasn't communicated or conveyed in any of the collateral or any of the information that surrounds the product? And there's a lot of information about it. So why have consumers been duped into thinking there's something wrong with their phone?
It's the first major hardware issue, Dean, to hit the iPhone on CEO Tim Cook's watch. How much responsibility for this poor handling of the issue does he have to accept?
You only have one throat to choke, and that's the CEO.
OK. Glyn, can Apple be criticised for timing major upgrades of its operating system to coincide with the release of new phones? Is that ultimately behind this issue?
Well, not really, in the sense that it's the natural time to do it. If you're launching new phones, you tend to launch new software, and therefore people on the older phones want to have some of those benefits, and therefore, you could argue that they're actually doing the users a favour. I mean, I agree that this is really about batteries, and I think it's a very important point here.
I can't see how users it's a favour. I just don't get it.
Well, because you're giving them new features. I mean, when you upgrade the software on a new phone, the people
but
with
those
the
new
old
features
phones
are slowed down by the
features.
fact their phone's being slowed down. So, but they don't
no,
get
but
the
that's
benefits
only because the batteries are on. As I'm just about to say, the point is you should be able to change your battery more easily. That the issue is how easily you can change your battery. And I think Apple and other manufacturers have been at fault in not making it clear that by changing your battery more regularly, you can actually boost the performance of your phone, and they should make that easier and they should make that cheaper. And so that's the really big issue here, and it affects all manufacturers.
Dean, I mean, you know, Apple has, and so do other.
How come they've never promoted that initiative?
Yeah, Dean, other manufacturers, just as Apple do, make phones that have no user upgradable parts, unlike the old days when batteries could be removed. I mean, to a certain extent, this is a problem of their own making, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that they've got themselves in this trouble and they need to get themselves out. And the way they're reacting right now is slow. It's very corporate. It's very self-interested. They're taking a 50,000-foot view when they've got to get down to 5 foot where the consumer is and how frustrated that consumer really is thinking about Apple. That's a major problem. They've got to get down to the consumer level and understand how they're feeling.
Dean, what would be the implications for Apple if they lost any of the class action lawsuits currently filed against it on this issue, or even if it was found guilty of planned obsolescence in France, where, as we were hearing earlier, it's illegal?
Yeah, well, I think it would have a very detrimental impact on their brand and a very detrimental impact on their wallet, but their wallet's pretty big. Here, the bigger issue is their brand reputation that is, as we know, worth billions of dollars, and that could be impacted by this debacle. So really, they need to be very mindful of that the success of Apple isn't because of the company, it's because of their consumer that loves the Apple products. And here we're hearing that the actual Apple products have been slowed down without consumers knowing. So I think that makes it rather opaque. And I think to, you know, the other guest here, we are looking at Apple to be more transparent. What I want to hear is hide nothing, tell all. What's been going on here and why have you been doing it this way?
Glyn, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I absolutely agree. I'm a great fan of transparency, and I think if this leads to Apple and all manufacturers being more transparent, then that would be a tremendous gain for the consumers because they will see what's going on in the devices which they own. At the moment, Apple and other companies are treated almost as if you don't own the device and you just sort of get it by favor of the companies. So we need more transparency, and we need something, there's a movement called right to repair. You should have a right to repair the things that you buy, and that means putting in new batteries, putting in new screens. At the moment, Apple and other companies make that very hard, and I think that's got to change, and that would avoid a lot of these kind of problems.
Wang Boyuan, you've been very patient, sir. I know you want to come in on this. Do you want to respond to what you've heard?
Yeah, speaking of transparency, I think since starting from 2008, I was beginning to use MacBook running like Mac OS. There's a built-in indicator inside the MacBook, to indicate the users if their battery is unhealthy or is need to be replaced. I think the iOS is just lack of this function. This is it. It needs the transparency, it's indicator inside iOS to tell people if your battery is, affecting your whole performance on your phone and your battery may be, need to be replaced. Yeah, I think that's what transparency on this device, on this consumer product needs to.
Samsung has a 2-year warranty on all of its smartphone batteries. I mean, is 2 years what you'd expect a smartphone battery to last?
If the battery can be replaceable, no matter from yourself or from the consumer, the consumer services, I think 2 years is a good lifespan for a normal battery. Yes.
Glyn, should people who've spent $1,000 on a new iPhone X expect to experience similar performance issues in 2 years from now as the battery in their devices ages?
I think they probably can, because it's in the nature of this technology. If you think about it, it's pretty crazy. We've got a lump of metal which stores electricity inside your phone. It's a miracle it works at all. So I don't think there's any way to guarantee that it won't happen, however advanced the technology. But one thing I would say is that I think people need to start asking, do they really need to upgrade? Because they've got these amazingly powerful pieces of technology in their pockets. They're effectively supercomputers in their pockets. Why do they keep needing to upgrade? And it's obviously partly to do with the kind of Apple magic, but maybe society needs to start asking, do we need to have this upgrade cycle?
Dean, it's obvious that consumers are pretty angry about this issue. However, we don't expect our cars to go on forever without seeing some sort of drop in performance. So why should we expect our phones to do so?
Yes, but you know, with a car, you get a warranty. You get a 20,000 mile, 100,000 mile, 150,000 mile warranty. It's proactively offered to you to have your car, as it were, upgraded or checked to make sure it's still working and all the backlights are working. So it offers it to you. Samsung offers you a 2-year warranty. What we have here is Apple offering nothing, and including no information about the very fact that it exists. So that's the issue. It's opaque. They need to become transparent. This issue will force transparency because customers are going to be clamoring for them to be more open and to be more transparent. And the fact is, all this litigation that's going to be coming against them is going to force them also to be more transparent. What is their next step? What are they going to offer beyond a cheaper battery replacement? Where's the warranties? Where's all that information and where's that offer?
Glyn, $1,000 is a major investment for most people. I mean, are consumers naive to expect you know, their phones to last more than 24 months, to still feel brand new after 2 years?
Well, as you say, it's a lot of money, but the technology is amazing. But I think they do need to think whether they need to upgrade it or whether it's good enough. I mean, personally, I don't upgrade my phone. I haven't upgraded one for 5 or 6 years because it does everything I need. And why do people upgrade? I mean, if they need it, it's good money. It's worth spending. But if they don't, then, as you say, it's a lot of money, and what are they going to get for it?
Dean, is Apple a victim of its own marketing here? I mean, consumers are buying into Apple's premium quality and brand status, therefore they expect the exceptional. And here we have Apple facing a crisis that it appears not to know how to deal with.
Exactly. I think that, you know, this is they're taking a very corporate stance. They're showing lots of self-interest in terms of protecting themselves and protecting their business strategy. And that's the accusation. Is this a deliberate business strategy with obsolescence in these phones that will make people perceive the need to buy a new phone because they don't know what's actually happening with it caused by Apple? So to me, it's a crisis management situation. They're not handling it very well. The top line of any crisis is hide nothing, tell all. And guess what? They've been hiding this for ages and they haven't been telling us about it. So it's a really massive flaw in their response that they've been caught short. And the very fact that they're doing these reactionary issues like cheaper battery replacements, in a sense, is acceptance of guilt.
So let's imagine.
So that will be picked on by those people who are looking to take them to court.
All right, so let's imagine we were speaking to Tim Cook right now, that we had him on the programme. What would you say to him?
I would say to him that I like to call it a prep strategy. You know, what's the purpose of of why you were doing this? You've said that. What was the reason? Was it for you? Was it for the consumer? Was it for the phone? Let me understand that. Give me some examples, you know, whether it's iPhone 4, iPhone 6, what are we talking about here? And then get back to the purpose of Apple wanting to satisfy its consumers and to do everything it can to make that satisfaction, to deliver it. So I think that's what they need to do. But clearly hide nothing, tell all is going to be very awkward for them because of the situation legally, where they don't want to be accepting too much because of the implications that has for the court of the court of public opinion likely coming back with a guilty verdict.
Glyn, would you agree with that? I mean, what would your advice to Tim Cook be?
Well, yeah, I certainly do agree that transparency has to be the way forward, and I would also urge him to be proactive in letting people do what they want with their own equipment. This idea that they have a right to repair. If Apple could espouse that and say, look, we're on your side, we believe that you do have the right to repair things as you wish, then I think that would help to forge stronger bonds with its customers. And I think other manufacturers need to do the same. Hopefully we could see a very competitive situation whereby more and more manufacturers would bend over backwards to make it easy for their customers to do this kind of thing. Because that way they'd have a far better handle on what's happening with their equipment, and also they'd have the options to repair things.
Dean, Apple is a very wealthy company. I mean, is it too focused on profit, do you think?
Well, I think that, you know, it's an amazingly oiled machine. It does extraordinarily well. It has analysts and shareholders to answer to, and therefore most corporations are tied to their shareholder returns. But Apple's always been positioned to be loved by its consumer. So I think we have a question here where that could be challenged, that basic idea of trust, the idea of this excellence, product excellence and marketing excellence and brand excellence. Suddenly we're seeing the veneer crack and people are able to peer behind that, and there's some stuff down there that we don't like looking at, and it doesn't look that good, and this is exactly that. So to Glenn's point, the idea of transparency and more flexibility and people maintaining their product, I think's already here. That ship's already left. They're just going to have to catch up with it and get on board, because there's no way we're going back. We're going forward now, and the customer's going to demand that transparency, and they're going to be demanding clear product strategies when they buy their next phone in terms of the warranty, battery replacement, etc. They want it to be honest and transparent, and Apple has not been.
Wang Boyuan, would you agree with that? Is this a pivotal moment for Apple? I mean, it is the #1 brand that most phone users in the world turn to, the most expensive brand to buy. People would like to assume that they're buying safe in the knowledge of quality and longevity. Does Apple need to change?
From the history or short history perspective, even Apple's most classic products has its flaws. The antenna gate from iPhone 4, the band gate from iPhone 6. Even the best-selling Apple products have these flaws. But for the battery gate, so-called battery gate, they have a compensation, they provide the bargain battery price. I think that is their, it fits their core value, yes.
Glyn, many of us are iPhone users. A lot of us are bugged by the fact that our iPhones aren't running as quickly as they used to. What are we to do? What would your advice be? I mean, it's one thing about getting the battery replaced. There are 5 people in my household. That's going to cost us a lot of money to get our batteries upgraded or replaced. Do we wait? Do we buy new phones? What do we do? What's your advice?
I would advise, yes, upgrading the battery. I think that's the simplest and most effective way of getting better performance. And that's another reason why Apple and the other manufacturers should be offering batteries as cheaply as possible, because it is the easiest way to get better performance from your products. The fact that they try and turn it into a profit center, I think, is unacceptable, because they shouldn't be price gouging people for something that should be a basic sort of necessity for upgrading your product.
Dean, I asked you earlier about your advice for Apple. What about your advice to Apple consumers then? What would people who perhaps have had their trust?
Obviously take a stand. I think. Yeah, trust has clearly been eroded here. When there's a problem with a Toyota car, as we've seen, and the kill function in Volkswagen's cars, you took your car in and you got a free upgrade. You didn't have to spend any money on that correction that they made a problem with that they admitted. They fixed it. Here's a situation where deliberately Apple's been slowing down people's phones. They've been perceiving they're not being right. To me, is it enough to reduce the cost of the battery replacement, or should you be obliged just to replace it if the customer so wishes? I think it's going to get to that point where there's an expectation I shouldn't be paying you for a battery replacement because you've never made it clear in your collateral that that's something I would need to do. So now that I am aware of that, and it's been a deliberate strategy on your part, you need to be responsible for that. And I don't think I should pay for that replacement.
All right, gentlemen, there. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it. Thank you all for being with us. Glyn Mood, Wang Boyuan, and Dean Crutchfield. As always, thank you for watching. Don't forget, you can see the programme again at any time just by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion on this, join us at our Facebook page. That's at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian, Finighan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.